Good morning. Welcome back to Venture Daily. On today's show, Europe's top diplomats are racing to Geneva for emergency talks with Iran, hoping to stop Trump from bringing the U.S. into full-blown war.
And Cloudflare CEO warns that publishers are getting gutted by AI bots that scrape their content without paying and says it's only going to get worse. I'm Josiah Simons.
I'm Jackson Fordyce. It's Friday, June 20th. Let's get you smarter before your first meeting. A new study out of MIT just gave us the brain scan equivalent of a slap on the wrist for using AI.
Yeah, it turns out using AI chatbots like GPT-4o to help write stuff actually dulls your brain activity compared to doing the task solo. Like, literally, the neurons were just chilling.
Researchers strapped EEG headsets onto a group of college students and had them write essays under 3 conditions: no help, Google help, and GPT-4o help. And the more they relied on the tech, the less their brains lit up.
The LLM users had up to 55% less brain connectivity than those who just relied on their own thoughts. That's a bigger drop than search engines. Basically, AI did the heavy lifting and the brain went on vacation.
And when they swapped groups later in the study, the students who'd use AI struggled to think independently without it. Meanwhile, the solo thinkers actually became more productive when they finally got AI help.
MIT's takeaway: don't use AI too early in the learning process or you risk shallow encoding, aka you remember nothing and learn nothing. Save it for after you've engaged your brain a bit.
So if you're using ChatGPT to write your college essay, maybe try first using your brain. It still works, probably.
All right, Jackson, I want to tell you about Public.
Yes.
Before we jump into the headlines, if you take investing seriously, you need to know about Public.com. That's where you can invest in everything: stocks, bonds, crypto. You can even earn some of the highest yields in the industry, like the 7% or higher yield you can lock in with a bond account. Public is a FINRA-registered, SIPC insured platform that takes your investments as seriously as you do. Fund your account in 5 minutes or less at public.com/venture and get up to $10,000 when you transfer your old portfolio. Paid for by Public Investing. Full disclosures in the podcast description below. Check out our link. Public.com/venture. It's in the description. And if you like what we do here at Venture Daily, take a second to like this video, comment on it, and of course, go click that link, public.com/venture.
Absolutely.
All right, Jackson, let's get into the news.
Let's do it. First story of the day: European powers are scrambling to prevent a full-scale Middle East war as President Trump weighs joining Israel's offensive against Iran. Britain, France, and Germany will meet with Iran's foreign minister in Geneva today in a last-ditch effort to de-escalate the crisis and revive stalled diplomacy.
All right, here's a look at the lineup of who is meeting. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, Britain's foreign secretary, David Lammy, French foreign minister, Jean-Noel Barrot. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these right, but just go with it.
Good.
And German foreign minister, Johann Wadepool, as well as EU foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas. So you can see them on the screen here. I made this graphic. I'm pretty proud of this graphic here. It just shows a lot of energy, a lot of movement. They're headed to, where is it? Geneva? Is that right?
Yeah,
Geneva to meet.
Talk about peace with Iran. The main conversation is going to be around to restart international monitoring of Iran's nuclear program and discuss reductions to its ballistic missile stockpile. So tensions have surged following Trump's public statement said that he may enter the conflict.
Right.
In Israel's recent strikes on Iran, which derailed a 6th round of nuclear negotiations with President Trump.
That's right. Trump said literally, nobody knows what I'm going to do and that he may get involved.
Maybe not even him. Maybe not even Trump himself.
Not even him. All right, the Geneva meeting revised the E3 format from the 2015 nuclear deal, which Trump withdrew from in 2018. Back then, he called it one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. So that was in 2015 when that deal was done. 2018, U.S. pulls out, which prompted a response from Iran to ramp up uranium enrichment. European ministers hope the meeting will reestablish direct diplomatic engagement with Tehran, their first since Israel has launched attacks.
Yes, and it is important to note that E3 is comprised of Britain, France, and Germany. So those will be the 3 main players in this conversation in Geneva with Iran.
Right.
But for more on that story, I spoke with Oliver Libby.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Jackson, and great to see all the wonderful work you all are doing at Venture Daily. Oliver Libby here from HL Ventures and City Rock Venture Partners. I'm the co-founder and managing partner here.
This is us and Oliver monitoring the situation with our coffee this morning. My first question to Oliver: with Trump openly mulling U.S. intervention and Europe scrambling to revive diplomacy, are the Geneva talks a real shot at de-escalation or just the final photo op before war?
Look, I think it's really hard to predict. And in fact, as a business person, that's probably the most important part of this crisis is just very hard to tell. I certainly am a big believer, as someone who started my career in the national security world, that we should try everything we can to stay out of armed conflict whenever possible. And I think the broad swath of the American business community probably agrees with that. If push comes to shove and we need to do something, then it should be really well planned and carefully thought out. But I'm certainly in favor of trying to use the tools of diplomacy and our allies to maintain stability.
I also asked Oliver, the E3 is pushing for full nuclear access and missile cuts. Does Iran have any incentive to concede when the threat of regime change hangs in the air?
The Iran deal, so-called, from back in the Obama administration, achieved some of those goals, and I think there's various views as to whether Iran was keeping to most of the precepts in that deal. But ultimately, at this point, it seems like the Israeli operations over the last few days have been quite effective, and I think there would always have to be a concern in Iran that if there's an escalation, it's hard to predict where it will go. So, I don't want to speculate as to whether I would have done this now and like this, but given that this is where we are, I suspect that there is an incentive for Iran to come to the table. However, there would have to be openness on the side of Israel and America and our allies to then come to the table and make a deal happen and make it a deal that we can enforce and that people can stick to, because ultimately the fewer nations that have nuclear weapons, especially those who've espoused an interest in possibly using them, the better for global security.
All right, Jackson, I want to dig a little deeper into the Iran deal, which was back in 2015. So we get this nuclear deal called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran deal, between Iran and the P5+1. What is that? Okay, 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. So that's China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, plus Germany, plus one. Okay. Together with the European Union was also involved. But then, as we mentioned, in 2018, Trump pulled out of that deal, and Iran immediately escalates by ramping up their uranium enrichment. So that escalation caused the EU and E3's United Kingdom, France, Germany to kind of be sidelined for the next, it's been 7 years since then, and they've really not been involved in the Iran deal, in the Iran conversations, and now we've seen the escalation all the way to this point, to now we've got Israel, Iran, full-on war potentially breaking out. So Trump basically said, instead of working through multilateral framework for the last 7 years, he said, I'm going to push for a tougher unilateral pressure campaign aimed at forcing Iran into a new deal, and that's marginalized the European diplomatic approach. So now they're back in position today to meet for the first time in basically 7 years with the Iranians.
Absolutely. And so I asked Oliver, after being sidelined during the Trump years, 7 years, you mentioned, can Britain, France, and Germany, the E3, realistically reassert themselves as credible negotiators with Tehran?
I think that it becomes part of a complex calculus of using every tool available. So I don't know. I can't speculate as to Tehran's calculus and who they're willing to trust. But if I were them, I'd talk to whomever might avoid an escalation of this conflict, especially because the escalations don't look great for Iran. That said, a general war in the Middle East is not good for the global economy either. We've already seen oil spike and uncertainty. I think after the dislocation of the tariffs from a couple months ago, the markets have largely recovered, and we were getting back into a place where in our neck of the woods in VC, we were seeing some deals getting done and more liquidity. And to go back into an area of enormous potential crisis and uncertainty in the economy is in a narrow business sense, not something that's super welcome. So, if the E3 can intercede and Tehran's willing to deal with them and come to the table and make a deal that we can all trust, which is a tall order, then I wish them all the luck.
Well, this could be, as people are saying, the last-ditch effort before this weekend we might see the war actually fully break out, the U.S. enter, be a part of Israel's side, and then what happens then? World War III, potentially.
Yeah, I just don't know if without the U.S. there will any credible talks happen between the E3 and Iran. Without the U.S. there, is anything going to happen actually?
I don't know, but they're counting on them getting some sort of foothold to say, hey, if you guys stop making nukes, which you aren't doing, but
don't enrich your uranium past a certain level. But even if they come to that conclusion, right? They say, hey, we're not going to do that. Will Israel let up? Will America, not join
enter.
not enter with Israel. So
You're right.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out today, and we can report on it again on Monday when we find more information. But with the last question to Oliver, with Netanyahu escalating and Trump eyeing re-entry to the world stage, is diplomacy even viable? What does a plan B actually look like if Geneva fails?
Diplomacy is always viable. I mean, there's always a chance for diplomacy up until a time where there's not a chance. And there's certain episodes in history, around appeasement going into World War II, where at the end of the day, all the tools of diplomacy weren't able to avoid a conflict. And that's tragic when that happens, even when it's necessary. But at this particular moment in time, we've seen diplomacy be successful in this part of the world. And I certainly don't think, given the pace at which this crisis developed, that all the diplomatic options are exhausted. So no, I remain hopeful up until the point where hope is gone. And again, I think Iran takes seriously our European allies. I think NATO is the most powerful military alliance in history, and its members should be taken seriously. And so, yeah, I mean, I really do. I said it before, but I wish them luck. I really do hope that this can be stopped short of a general war in the Middle East, which isn't good for anybody.
Sounds like Oliver's optimistic that maybe some progress can be made today.
I guess we'll find out. Thank you to Oliver Libby for being on the show today.
All right, Jackson, what's next?
Yep. Next story, Cloudflare CEO Matthew Prince just warned that AI poses an existential threat to publishers as search traffic referrals collapse and readers increasingly rely on AI-generated summaries instead of visiting original websites.
That's right. At an Axios event in Cannes, Prince shared alarming stats. Google now crawls 18 pages for every referral click it sends. So while OpenAI's ratio is 1,500 to 1 and Anthropic's is a staggering 60,000 to 1.
Wow.
If you're looking at it on screen, 10 years ago, Google crawled 2 pages for every visitor it sent a publisher. That number is now, today, for Google, 18 to 1. This shift means readers are trusting AI over original reporting, undermining publishers' ad revenue models.
Prince said Cloudflare is building a tool to block content scraping and protect publishers' work, something he claims nearly every major publisher supports. While AI companies include source links, most users don't click them, leaving media outlets uncompensated.
That's right. Prince argues that AI-driven browsing will dominate the future web unless decisive action is taken now.
Exactly. And so for more on the story, I spoke with Ben Narasin.
I'm Ben Narasin. I run Tenacity Venture Capital, which is a seed and occasionally pre-seed fund. And before that, I spent about 18 years as an investor, about 7-8 years as a traditional VC, mainly at NEA, and about 8 years before that, having started one of the first institutional seed funds in 2007. And prior to that, I was an entrepreneur for 25 years with one IPO under my belt.
Look at his background. It's so, his mind is so big thinking.
His background, like his resume background, or literally the background that he's sitting there?
Literally background of his
books.
All the books.
Can you imagine how much is in his brain?
So I asked Ben, how has AI impacted traditional search referral traffic to news publishers, and do you agree that it poses an existential threat?
Well, actually, it's interesting. Last year, I saw about 2,000 pitches. I made only 3 investments. And one of them was a company called ScalePost. ScalePost is a marketplace where traditional publishers and other providers of content put content libraries up to be licensed by AI. And they have about 50 publications, traditional publications like Time Magazine and Harvard Business Review, and then specialty mags. And my way of looking at it is, you're not going to have a productive environment where the New York Times is suing OpenAI. So you're better off using a marketplace to create a bid-ask environment and let the training of LLMs that specialize in any topic find the right documentation, data, etc., whether that's text, audio, or video, to train. So I think that while, certainly if we were to separate for a second search, which is a very specific subset of this question, I've moved off of Google for the most part to Perplexity or ChatGPT for most of my searches. And yes, you're getting summaries of a lot of content. I do tend to click through. But I think ultimately what you're going to find is the media publishers are going to discover they can be very well compensated by the LLMs for allowing them to use their data and to train on it. It's just that we're passing through the period of the Wild West and settling a couple of towns, and it takes a while before you go from San Francisco being mountain ranges to San Francisco being minor towns to San Francisco being what it is today. We're in that journey, and we got a few tents set up so far. We'll get to San Francisco, the city.
Got a few tents, and then we're getting to San Francisco.
It's interesting, though. I mean, I hear what he's saying, but I wonder if you're a website or a data holder that has already been scraped,
yeah,
and you never got paid for it, then you're kind of out of luck, you know?
You just got to rely on the future of like, we got to get more data on our platform. We got to, if you're the New York Times, right, you're going to rely on future stories, you're going to rely on future reporting.
Right.
But I think they already have deals with a lot of these media publishers, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Some of them do, yes.
Yeah.
But if you're just us online.
Or an Axios, right? I don't think Axios has a deal with OpenAI or any other LLM.
Right.
I guess they're kind of screwed until they start making new content and they strike a deal with
That's why they wrote this story.
That's right. They wrote this.
They love this from Cloudflare. Yeah, this is all an Axios story here. But we talked about how there's this Matthew Prince is saying that 10 years ago, Google crawled 2 pages for every visitor it sent a publisher. Let's dig a little more into those numbers. So 6 months ago, this is what he says. Google, that ratio was 6 to 1. OpenAI, it was 250 to 1. Anthropic, 6,000 to 1. Now, today, Google 18 to 1. So it's tripled. For OpenAI, 1,500 to 1. I don't even want to do that math, Jackson.
Yeah, that is about 5x'd it.
And
maybe
Anthropic, 6,000 to 1 to now 60,000 to 1. Math?
10x'd it.
10x. All right. So between the lines, people aren't following the footnotes, Prince said. So as you can tell, like these new crawl to visit ratios are just crazy. And this is the trend we're seeing.
Yeah. So I asked Ben, what did the new crawl to visit ratios from Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic reveal about how AI companies are using publisher content?
Well, I mean, I think the bigger issue is that this is one of the many reasons why Google is, for the first time in its entire history, at threat from material competitors. If you look back in time, there was no second best Google. I mean, sorry, Microsoft, but I don't know who's using Bing. But now all of a sudden there is. And that's why you've seen these phenomenal valuations on the non-baseline LLMs like Perplexity, right? Which is in essence using existing LLM technology to do the search. One thing that's really intriguing and sort of an offshoot of this point, though, is the LLMs, the AI has already eaten everything available to it online. And so now they need more. Like they've eaten the whole internet. So that's why you're starting to see an expansion beyond what you're talking about into things like voice, audio, video, right? Like that's going to unlock a lot more training data. So in some ways, by the time we get around to dealing with this, it'll be a little bit of last year's problem. Now, the flip side, of course, is that content is constantly refreshed in any media company. You're a perfect example of that, Daily Show, right? So when you have a constant refresh of new content, that can continue to train the engines and therefore will constantly be valuable. And therefore you will see deals. I mean, you look at Reddit, the company's entire value, as far as I can tell as a public company, is based on the licensing deals it did to sell its garbage dump of content. Apparently people need to train on garbage just as much as they need to train on erudite information as well.
He's talking to you, man. You love Reddit.
I read it from time to time.
It goes into my next question with Ben. Increasing trust in AI summaries is hurting publishers' ability to monetize their content. And will this trend accelerate? And are we headed toward a future where AI summaries all but replace direct engagement with original sources?
It's tough. I think that's a very personal question on an individual by individual basis. As an example, I tend to, if I've got 20 minutes in a day, walk across the street to the library and read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal in paper form. Okay, it's a different function than what I expect out of AI. Think of it as sort of hunter-gatherer, like, hunter versus gatherer. Hunter, go out, find the animal, kill the animal, bring it home and eat it. Gatherer, wander around, find lots of stuff, right? So there's a much more browse and gather approach when I read the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. I want to find new information I might not have thought of. When I'm going to any engine, whether it's Google or OpenAI or Perplexity, I have a specific question in mind and I need to find that information. Now, as I pointed out with Scale Post and creating a marketplace, I think that they will ultimately monetize their content in different ways. Think about how technology has evolved, right? Like the record companies were all so worried, oh my God, it's going to destroy our business. I think they're doing just fine, right? Like what happens is you get paid less per unit, but a lot more units go out there. So I think you will see a healthy balance created between the AI engines and the people that provide content. Now, some of this will be through regulation, some of it will be through litigation, and some will be just business. If you can just get it done, if you go on Scale Post and buy what you need, license what you need, would you think that's going to cost you more than the lawsuit that they're going to create when they come chasing after you? New York Times has deep pockets. I would suspect that a licensing deal will ultimately be cheaper than the lawsuit, and that alone is a reason to just hold hands and figure out how to do it together.
Everyone just work together. Relax, work together. On Scale Post's website, there's a Cloudflare like customer picture thing.
Really? That's funny. All right. So we actually saw Prince, the CEO of Cloudflare, give a pretty big promise here. He says they're coming out with a new tool that will stop content scraping and that every publisher you have ever heard of is on board. Quote.
Everyone you've ever heard of.
Everyone I've ever heard
You name
of.
them, they're on board. This guy? Yeah, he's on board. Is she on board? She's on board.
That's the case according to Prince, which maybe is true. I mean, I think every single publisher known to man is aware of the AI problem right now and is trying to figure out a solution for it.
Yep. And so we asked Ben, can you help us understand what this new tool from Cloudflare will do and why it's so valuable to publishers?
I mean, I've met Matthew a handful of times, half a dozen or so times. Obviously, NEA funded him. He's a great guy. The company's great. I suspect there's some sort of, CAPTCHA-style intercept. Figure out if it's a robot, stop it from going in. But I think that there's, I'm not going to harp only on this one company. I guess I am. Well, I was talking to ScalePost recently, just a couple days ago. All of the content providers are right now just trying to understand who and what is accessing their data how. Once you understand that, look, why would you block people if you can get paid by them? Now, it could be that the combination of Matthew's efforts and ScalePost's efforts mean you block, and then first you build the wall around your village, and then you charge for people to come into your village and get your goods. That could be entirely reasonable. But I think generally speaking, the sort of protectedist nature, the build walls around things, it's happened every single time new technology has come out, and those walls have all gotten torn down. We do not need a wall between East and West Berlin. Okay, those things are temporary, non-survivable, and will be destroyed eventually.
Dang, dude. I'm just thinking about the clips that are going to come out of this episode. Like, which one do I choose? All four of Ben's answers.
We'll do a full long clip of all of his whole interview.
Yeah, we probably have to. The analogies are just like spot on.
They're insane. Maybe there's the Cloudflare and ScalePost. Maybe that's the collaboration that Prince is talking about.
Yeah, potentially.
There are eyes for those who wish to see. But thank you to Ben Narasin for joining the show today.
All right, let's move on to our funding highlight. Griffin just raised $11 million to make investing as easy as buying a latte, literally.
Griffin's app automatically buys stock in the places you shop. Spend at Walmart, drop $1 into Walmart stock. They call it stock where you shop.
That's right. They've now raised $22 million total with 500,000 registered users and over 1 million app downloads. New features include an AI chatbot and a family plan to teach kids how to invest.
Now, what will this funding be used for? More educational tools, AI-powered insights, and budget tracking, especially for their core user base, which is women in their 40s to 60s and Gen Z just getting started.
I think that was probably the most interesting part that I read.
Yeah.
Their core user base is women in their 40s to 60s, which is like kind of an unheard of demo there.
Yeah.
All right, Griffin's making investing more approachable and tied to everyday behavior. And if it works, it could shift how a lot of people first enter the market. So well done to Griffin on their new raise, and congratulations.
Money.
That's right. All right, that's it for Venture Daily. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope we helped you get a little bit smarter today.
And thank you to Content Stack for letting us use your space to film today here in Austin, Texas. If you like today's show, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or X, leave us a like, a comment, and a review. Throw us a 5-star rating if you think we earned it. And as always, we will see you Monday morning at Venture Daily.